thank you for sticking around. I think we've still got everyone from the morning, from the first session. So yeah, we have a couple of questions that have come through, but I believe Lee's next presentation should answer them. So we'll get started with the training session, and I'll hand it over to yourself, Lee.
Remember to take myself off mute this time. So thank you, Sagar, and yeah, thank you for everyone who has stayed on through the break for the second part of the session. Again, please also just another reminder that we'll be recording this session for future reference, and it will also be made available probably on our website, but if not, it will also be available via email for people who want to take it up. So this training session will constitute Part B of the section of the Act for the purposes of those that will be making an application to join the list of independent auditors. So Section 55L2B states that the Commission must not appoint an auditor to the list of auditors unless we are satisfied that the auditor have the relevant skills, competencies and qualifications to conduct assurance audits or compliance audits, and undertake training or have sufficient knowledge or experience in relation to the VEU scheme. So part of the reason for this second training session is to enable those that are interested in joining the program to be able to tick off that they've undertaken that training as well as sufficient knowledge or experience. So thank you for those that have stayed on. So there are three types of audits that sit within the VEU Act. The first is the annual energy acquisition statement audits. So the onus is on the retailers to offset their greenhouse gas liabilities through the purchase of certificates. So at the end of each year, for each calendar year, the retailers have to do their calculations of how much carbon dioxide equivalents they've generated from their electricity sales as well as their gas sales. There is the option in there for them to have some exemptions from participating in this program, and that all needs to be audited, which is a requirement of the Act, before it is submitted to us for our review. So there's 33 of these this year, and there's been around the number of 30 of these every year for the past few years. What's new is the compliance audits, so sitting under 55A of the Act, and the assurance audits, which sit as 55G of the Act. There's some other requirements that have been placed on both us and others through the changes in the legislation last year. So the other requirements around audits are that the requirement for the Commission to publish an assurance audit schedule. We'll be looking to use a combination of risk-based and timing. So given that APs will be going through an annual re-accreditation process, if the assurance audit can be done prior to that and then feed into the reappointment process, that's what we'll be looking to do. But we'll also be balancing that with risk and previous behaviours of APs in where they sit within that 2-year schedule. The other requirement is that we review that schedule at least every 12 months. The other requirement, which is new, is for accredited persons to undertake assurance audits at least every 2 years. So those last couple of points all tie in nicely to each other. And the new requirement is for us, the Commission, to publish and maintain a list of independent auditors. We do have a list of pre-approved auditors on our website at the moment, and they are predominantly the ones that are undertaking the annual energy acquisition statement audit. So it's an expansion of the work within the program, and also an expansion too of the number of auditors we'll need to cover off on that work. And I think that's one of the questions that was in the chat there, which I'll come to. So what we're looking to do is that we realise that there are a range of sizes of APs within the program. We have some that are only involved in a small number of activities and doing a small number of installs within those activities, through to those that are doing, they're pre-approved for 20 plus activities, and they're doing hundreds of thousands of installs a year. So When we've developed the audit scope, we've put an appendix to the audit scope for the assurance audit, and we've given an indication of a minimum number of installations that need to be undertaken per activity, so that we've generated a bit of scalability to those audits, so that the volume that we're looking at as part of the audit is representative of the work and participation in the program that the AP undertakes. And you'll see there that bottom dot point there is that it's the responsibility of the AP to provide the ESC with a copy of the audit. And something else that's new is that the introduction of notices requiring the audits. So that's something that the APs will be experiencing probably for the first time, is actually receiving notices from us for them to undertake certain things, in this case an assurance audit. The VEU Act was amended to introduce compliance audits, and these will be used where the Commission has reasonable grounds to suspect an AP has contravened a provision of the Act or the regulations. It's a very low bar to require a compliance audit to be undertaken, and it's basically, layman's terms, that we have a suspicion that they haven't complied with either the Act or the regulations. So fairly low bar for a compliance audit to be undertaken. As I mentioned in the first session, these can be either undertaken by VEU staff, or we can, again, through issuing a notice to the AP, require them to engage somebody off the audit list to undertake the audit. And in those instances, the audit scope will be set by the Commission, because it will be related back to our suspicion around what hasn't been done or what has been done which doesn't comply. And little anomaly that it was introduced and was intended to be introduced, but the VEU does have the power to limit the number of compliance audits an auditor can undertake on an accredited person, and that number at the moment is sitting at 3 consecutive compliance audits. At the moment, there's no limitation on annual energy acquisition statement audit numbers or assurance audit numbers. So at the moment, the auditor can continue to undertake those on an ongoing and annual basis. Independent auditors, again, must comply with the Act and the regulations, like most auditors that undertake work under legislation, and again, must comply with the published audit guidelines, which we're developing at the moment. Auditors must have the relevant skills, competencies and qualifications to conduct the audits and have undertaken the training. So I touched on this on the first slide. Again, we have the power as the Commission that we can require an auditor on the list to undertake additional training. So that may be required where we see a shortfall or something that we're not that's not compliant in the audits that we're reviewing. And again, the Commission does have the power to remove auditors from the list of independent audits. Accredited persons, so there's a lot of requirements on the accredited persons, and there are some that are specifically outlined around their work with auditors. So Section 55E, so not 65E. So the accredited persons must comply with the Act and the regs, which is fairly standard for participation in any program. Must comply with the conditions of the notice, whether that be a compliance or an assurance notice. So that will be the scope and also the timing and the fact that they must take somebody off the list to undertake their audit. They must cooperate with the auditor. They must provide us with a copy of the audit report by the date specified. Again, a requirement of the notice that will be writing on them. They must not intentionally provide false and misleading information either to us or to the auditor. and again must not withhold without reasonable excuse information from the auditor. There is a little get out clause in the Act for the APs. They do have the protection against self-incrimination in relation to Section 55N and 55O, which are the compliance and the assurance audits. So there is a small loophole there for the APs that they aren't required to self-incriminate themselves. Again, audits, as you will all be aware, are conducted using a combination of methods, including site inspections, interviews with relevant staffs, and review of relevant documentation. And we don't see the accreditation or the compliance audits being any different from that. One of the fears of the commissioners is that this becomes a desktop-only situation, and that's not our expectation. And it hasn't been up until now with other audits that have been undertaken, and it will be our expectation to going forward that audits are done using a range of desktop and site-based and interview-based evidence gathering and checking. I suppose I've missed this in my slides, but I will just before I start on the feedback. So there has been some questions asked about what sort of numbers are we looking at. I think from memory, we've got 12 auditors listed on our website at the moment. Bit of a change for them. In the past, we have listed the company or the organisation as being the auditor that then has a lead auditor working within them. We're changing that process now, so the appointment of the auditor will sit with the individual rather than with the company. So again, if somebody does happen to move businesses, or that appointment will stay with them. So that's a little bit of a change from the current process to the new process that we'll be implementing. I've mentioned the relevant entities, so that the retailers, there's about 33 this year. There's been around 30 of those annual acquisition statements audits that are done each year. At the moment, we've got around 120 APs on the books. So there's potential for up to around 60 assurance audits each year to be undertaken as part of the program. As I said, some of them are involved with 2 activities, some of them are involved with 20 activities, some are doing a couple of thousand installs, some of them are doing 100,000 installs. So there's a range of scope and scale available within the AP space. And compliance audits, a bit of a how long's a piece of string type scenario there, where we haven't really used anything equivalent to that in the past. So that will be a bit of a wait and see in our workload planning and budgeting. We're looking at undertaking probably 1 per month of those. So we're looking at maybe 12 across the year for VEU staff. I'd suspect that will be the minority. We're probably looking at least that, if not double that, external, where we'll be requiring the AP to engage an auditor to undertake that. So there's, again, without knowing or having the experience of something new, we're looking at probably around the 20 to 25 of those being undertaken each year. So that gives a bit of an idea about what the numbers look like. Following on from today's session, we'll be contacting everyone that attended with an email as part of that. And please don't yell or scream or kick me too hard under the table, but there will be a survey involved, or a link to a survey involved with that. And again, because this is new for the Commission, they're very keen to actually hear back from the auditors their views on a number of different items within the program. And the first one is the initial appointment length for auditors. I know that this is previous places I've worked, this has sort of varied a little bit or become a bit of a bone of contention, but we're proposing either a 3 or a 5 year term for the auditors. And I put my case to the Commission about a month or so ago, and they wanted some extra feedback. So we're using this opportunity to get that feedback from the auditors about their views on what would be a good appointment length. So don't all jump in the Q&A and start voting now. We'll capture that as part of the survey. We've also proposed an assurance audit scope. We've tried to link that back to the requirements of an accreditation application so that we're sort of dovetailing both of those progresses in place. And the particular item on that we're looking for feedback from the auditors on, or the potential auditors on, is how have we got the numbers right in the appendix? So are we looking at the right number of installs for each activity is what we're looking for there, noting that some of those can be quite large and others can be quite small. We've also, again, had to put together new guidelines, so particularly around the compliance and the assurance audit it's a new space, and I think the current ESC guidelines have about 2 paragraphs for each compliance and assurance audits. They've blown out now to about 5 or 6 pages per item. So we want feedback on that. We don't want to be putting out publications or guidance material that's ambiguous or doesn't actually assist you in undertaking your work. And the other one, which question was asked earlier, and my comment about somebody stolen my slides and gone to the last page, is the Commission is quite keen to get an understanding on what the cost of these audits will be like. The other question we'll be asking in the survey is, for our planning purposes, given we have to do all the APs in a 2-year time period, is how long do we think some of those audits are going to take as well? So we don't want to be putting unrealistic expectations on APs who then put unrealistic expectations on auditors that they've got a limited time to actually undertake the audit. So that's the other item that we will be seeking feedback from you all on. That's probably enough from me. I'll hand back to Sagar and see if we've got any questions in the Q&A or any there that I haven't answered so far.
Thanks, Lee. Yes, feel free to send through any questions. I don't believe we have any right now. Either way, so as Lee mentioned, I'll give it a couple of minutes in case people have questions come through. Yeah, we will circulate a survey. It's going to only take 5 minutes. It's quite important. It'll give you guys a chance to provide critical feedback to us in terms of how you also see yourself participating in the program. If not, Lee, can you just go to the next slide? We've got our VEU details up here, and please feel free to email us and just address it to Lee or the VEU Audit team. And if you have any questions, we can always reply back to you. If you want to have a chat to us, we can arrange that as well. So we've had a question come through. Are there a fee to be an auditor? EPA have a large fee that needs to be paid in advance. Is there an expectation on insurance requirements?
Thank you, Stephen. No, that is one of our selling points. There is no fee at the moment to become an auditor within the VEU program. So most of the fees that are being imposed are actually going to be on the APs and the REs, the relevant entities. So that's a change that's come out of the legislation, particularly for the retailers this year, is that they will now incur a fee for submitting their annual statement to us. So that's fine. And yes, we do have an expectation on insurance requirements. So again, similar to most programs, we've got an expectation of a minimum amount of public liability and public liability insurance. And look, we've developed an application form, and we're trying to keep that as straightforward as we can, and that's one of the items that is in there. So yeah, I know. Yeah, so that's yeah. So there is an expectation on having insurance requirements.
Right, thanks, Lee. Another question: what's the involvement of the ESC in each audit, e.g., approving scopes, reviewing reports, or closing meetings?
So for the assurance audits, what we're looking to do is have the one standard scope for each assurance audit, so that the audit scope is consistent across all the APs, and will get the variability of their different size and participation in the program through the appendix is what we're looking at there. So for that, again, there won't be an expectation for the auditor to provide the scope or have us approve it. For the compliance audits, as I said, new function, but initially, given that it will be coming on the back of a suspicion from us that something isn't aligning with the Act or the regs, we will probably be drafting the scope and issuing that scope to the relevant AP to then go out and source an auditor to undertake that. If there's any confusion or that in what the scope is asking for, or how to address that, then we'll be open to having those discussions in that space. Part of again, closing meeting, probably the closing meeting will be with the AP rather than with us. As for reviewing the reports, that's what I see part of my team's job is, that it will be looking through the audit to see if there's anything the AP needs to do, but also to looking at has the auditor complied with their guidelines and our expectations of them in undertaking the audit. So looking to have that build I suppose a basis for either discussions and feedback to the auditor if required, but also to then past history and performance feeding into any reappointment process for the auditors at the end of their initial appointment. So I hope that answers Greg's question.
Right, thanks. Another question, similar line. So the cost of the audit will obviously be based on the scope.
So John, yes, we'll be sending out the draft audit scope, and the appendix will be as part of the email to the with the survey. So the email will probably, if I'm adding up correctly, probably have 3 attachments. One will be the proposed auditor guidelines. The other will be the draft audit scope. And there was probably another, no, probably just those 2 will be going out with the email. So you'll have those as well as the survey to have a look over before sort of ticking the box on where the cost of the audit will sit. Right.
I think, Doris, that was a similar question to what you had.
Yep, that's fine. Yep. So yep, as I mentioned, yep, we'll have the proposed scope, and look, what we say is probably the important bit there is the appendix that goes with the scope, which will give you an idea about how many activities or installations need to be looked at for each of the different activities.
Lovely. I think that's all the questions we have for today. Once again, thank you all for attending. I hope you took away a bit of information, and hopefully you think about applying to be part of our audit panel. So yeah, once again, feel free to email us on the email up above. We'll distribute the recorded session and the survey maybe later today. So it'll only take 5 minutes. But yep, thank you, and yeah, look forward to hearing from you all. See you.